Hey folks, welcome to today's discussion centered on the European GDPR and how to make sure you can make the best use of SalesIQ's GDPR-ready features to stay on the safe side of the law and at the same time protect the data of your customers, which has been entrusted to you. I'm your host, Chris, from the Zoho SalesIQ team, and will be responsible for bringing you up to speed. So, what is the GDPR? The General Data Protection Regulation is a law that took effect from 25th May 2018 this year across the European Union, the EU. For the uninitiated, it's a data privacy law aimed at protecting EU residents against the misuse of their personal data that they share on the web. Previously, websites could simply request user consent by displaying long, hard to understand terms and conditions. But it is now mandatory to request consent in an intelligible and easily accessible way. So, what happens if your organization or business is found to be in violation of the GDPR? There will be two levels of fines under this law. The first is up to 10 million euros or 2% of the company's global annual turnover of the previous financial year, or whichever is higher. And the second is up to 20 million euros or 4% of the company's global annual turnover of the previous year, whichever is higher. The potential fines alone are substantial and are a good reason for companies to ensure compliance with the regulation. We are delighted to inform that Sales IQ has already received several updates before the May deadline to make it GDPR ready. In fact, Zoho had operationalized two data centers in the EU way back in 2016 itself. One in the beautiful city of Amsterdam in Netherlands, and the other in Dublin in Ireland. With these two data centers, all the information that our European customers trust us with will be stored securely within the borders of the continent. This would also mean faster access time for our European customers, as their data no longer has to make the transatlantic trip from our US data centers and back. So your applications will load faster now. So let's take a brief look at all the different features SalesIQ offers to help you adhere to the GDPR. In case you're not using some of them or did not understand what they did, this will be a good chance to get up to speed. So, for the purposes of this demonstration, I am using Zoho CRM Plus's unified dashboard, as several CRM Plus customers are also participating. So don't panic if this sales IQ I'm using here appears to be a little different from yours. To activate GDPR specific safeguards, you need to go to Sales IQ settings. In CRM Plus, it's on the top right corner here. For standalone and Zoho One subscribers, the settings button is on the left side of your Sales IQ. Once you've clicked that, you need to go to Portal Settings. Scroll down all the way to the bottom of the page to the section that says Data Privacy Configurations. Under that, you have something called General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR safeguards. So you need to click the slider button on the far right corner to turn it on. Once the color changes from red to green, it means that your GDPR safeguards have kicked in for this particular account. I will now briefly explain what each of these safeguards work or what they do in practice. So let's take a look at the first one, protect sensitive data during data export. So you have two options under that. The first says prompt for a password every time an operator tries to export Zoho Sales IQ data. The second option is Do not protect Zoho SalesIQ data with a password when exported. To be on the safe side, we recommend you choose the first option that forces a password to be entered whenever visitor data is exported. I'll show you where exactly you export this data. So go back to the previous screen, but this time go to visitor history. Okay. As you all know, you can see all the visitors here who have been to your website in the past. And once you have filtered them, you would normally be able to export them as a data sheet, either in CSV or Microsoft Excel sheet. But after these safeguards have been kicked in, you can see that as soon as I try to export the data, it is asking me to enter my account password. So what does it do? How is this beneficial to you? Now, if you normally step outside your computer screen, or if there's a possibility that other people share your computer, it's highly likely that they may be able to export this customer data, which includes things like the customer's name, email address, city, state, country, the pages visited, the previous chat conversations, and all that. Many of this qualifies to be personal data. And if unauthorized people are able to download it without your knowledge, or when you're not around, then that is a potential breach of your company's security as well as the privacy of all the customers whose data has been compromised. So, this password protection that I just enabled will make sure that such unauthorized export of data without your knowledge does not happen. So, going back, we can now look at the next option on the list, which says, would you like to notify the visitors that your site uses cookies? So there are three options under that, as you can see. The first says, do not notify. The second says, notify visitors. And the third says, notify visitors and also provide them with an option to opt out if required. So before I explain what these three options are and how we can differentiate them, I'll just show you uh, how this entire feature works in practice. So right here, I have a website, okay, just a normal looking website that I just built. You can see the Sales IQ chat window, pretty standard, uh, the usual thing that you see on any website with Sales IQ. So I land on this website. There's no indication that I'm being tracked by an analytics system. If I were to use the chat module, there is no indication as to what will happen to the data after I start the chat. So what I could do now is I could go to a website that has these GDPR provisions enabled, and as soon as I go to that website, you will notice this particular feature that I was just talking to you about. So at the bottom of this new website that I just opened, you can see that there is a disclaimer or a cookie policy notice that you can see here. It says something about how cookies are useful and all that, and there's also a help link. Now there are two buttons. We will explain what these two do. So what happens here is that you're explaining that visitors to your website are being tracked and why that is necessary, and more information on that is available here. So once you enable this feature here from portal settings, there is a provision here for you to enter your company's cookie policy, the one that your legal team or your attorney prepared and gave to you. This URL should contain all the information about how you receive and process data on your website. So I just entered this URL here for Zoho, and I can see the same thing here. As soon as I click learn more here, you can see it opens a new tab and takes me to the cookie policy of Zoho.com website, where I can read, if necessary, save or print your cookie policy. In this case, it's ours. If I choose to agree to that, I can click got it, which means I permit your website analytics system to track me for the reasons mentioned. If I do not agree, I can simply click do not track. So just to show you how that works in practice, I can go to visitors online, okay? So there is no online visitor here. Okay, nobody is online, but I'm still on this website where SalesIQ is present. So until I click got it, I'm not going to show up on SalesIQ. Tracking has not yet started. We don't start the tracking and then inform the customer. We do it before we start the tracking, and only after they give their permission, we actually kickstart the analytics powered tracking system. So I'm going to proceed and click got it here. The banner disappeared. And if you noticed, the chat widget that was behind the banner did not obstruct the buttons on the banner. It always makes sure, the system always makes sure that the Sales IQ banner stays ahead of the chat widget so it does not uh, hide the buttons. So as soon as I clicked OK or got it on that banner, you can see that I am now being tracked. So this is me, and you can see the website here, Zulco Tours, the same one, and you can see me currently being tracked. So until I clicked got it, the system never tracked me. There was no information of this visitor at all. It was completely anonymous. Okay, so now let's say I uh, have questions about what's available on the website, and I need to use the chat system to ask some questions. That is where the next section comes into play. It says, would you like to notify the terms and conditions document to the visitors before they initiate the chat? And there are two options under that. One says, no, I do not wish to notify. And two, yes, I wish to notify. And again, there is a provision to enter your cookie policy URL. Let's see where exactly that shows up. So remember, we were talking about the chat window. Visitor tracking is handled by the banner that we already clicked OK to. So I'm going to go ahead and fill up information on the chat window. Let's see how the tracking module here works. And before that, I also wanted to show you another thing on the chat window. So if you look at the bottom of the chat window, there is an option to sign up for a newsletter campaign, but it is not automatically checked as per regulations. So even if a visitor did not see this message at the bottom, they will not be automatically subscribed to a mailing list or a newsletter without their explicit permission. So I need to actually click this checkbox here to receive these updates. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to check that just for demonstration purposes, and I'm going to start the chat. Okay, I'm going to just press enter now. And you can see this disclaimer or banner that says, by clicking I accept, you confirm that you have read and agreed to our terms and conditions in the document. And terms and conditions is clickable. So I will be able to just click that and read through your cookie policy to see exactly how you protect my data, what you do with it, etc. And if I don't give permission, then my data simply would not be captured by the system. But what you have to note now is just like how the tracking banner did not track me unless I gave permission or declined, the chat banner makes sure that it does not collect any information until I click accept or decline. So if you go to Sales IQ right now, you can see there is no incoming chat alert. You can see me here, but there is no evidence that a chat is actually taking place. And if you go to chat history section, the last chat was actually from yesterday. So the one that I tried to start now did not actually come through. No data was actually sent to Zoho at all, unless the customer gives permission to them. So again, no data in the missed section either. So let's see what happens if I click decline. So as soon as I click decline, the chat window simply minimized itself to the bottom of the page. And when I try to click open that, you can see that the name, email, and other information that I entered here is now missing because it was never stored, and so it's not possible to bring it back up. The information never reached Zoho at all. So again, very clear and capable safeguard there for the chat module. And the last option, it says mask visitors' IPs. So let's see what that does. If you remember when we were earlier on visitor history explaining the password protection system, you could actually see the visitor's IP address here. Forget about those with names and email addresses. So you might think, what exactly is the IP address useful for? Well, you'll be surprised. So there are several services in the market, free services in the market, like this one, for example, that allows you to enter an IP address. Okay, I can just show you. I'm going to copy this random IP address from here, visitor history, and I can paste it here and press get IP details. So as soon as I do that, this innocent looking IP address actually is able to give you a lot of information about that particular visitor, which city, state, country is from, its exact position, and it's even marked on a map. So this is a free service, imagine. So there's a lot of information that you can pull up about a visitor and trying to find out information about them, uh, especially if you're an unauthorized person not permitted to be looking at this data, it could get pretty tricky. So that is why we have instituted safeguards to make sure that the visitor's IP address is masked so that your agents or other people using the application will not be able to misuse the data. So I'm just going to go back to portal settings, and under the GDPR protection, I'm going to enable this feature that masks visitor IPs. So it's been turned on now, and I'm going to go back to the visitor history section of SalesIQ, and you can see now half the IP address here for every visitor has been automatically masked. You're not able to see the IP address at all. So this is the same visitor whose information we tried to look up earlier. So let's say I'm somebody malicious and I try to copy this IP address and I try to search for that. And as you can see here, it says very clearly invalid IP address. Please enter a valid IP address. So without the last four digits, it's not possible for anyone to use this information at all. It becomes completely unusable. And although the earlier protection system makes sure that people are not able to bulk export data without express authorization by inputting their password, you might think that it is still possible for them to manually write down information from here or simply copy paste a lot of information by selecting all of them and then exporting them illegally. So this IP address masking will make sure that visitors IP address do not show up to even your own staff within the company. And enabling this feature will also make sure that whenever on the chat window a customer sends you their 16-digit credit card information, the system will automatically recognize that 16-digit number as a credit card number and mask the credit card number too. So unlike the IP address where only half of it has been masked, the entire credit card number except the last four digits will be masked so that nobody will be able to misuse that data later. So those four protection mechanisms under SalesIQ's GDPR will make sure that your customers' data remains secure and you are able to avoid any legal challenges. And there are many people who say, well, the banner looks good, but most of my customers they don't understand English, or I do not operate in a country where English is the default language. So what do I do? Well, the banner message itself can be inputted here in Sales IQ itself. So this is the text that I entered. If your legal team has a different text that they want to use, you can simply copy paste that here. If you want that to show in a different language, you can also do that here. But if you want to translate the text on the buttons as well, then you need to make sure that you use an API that we provide to translate the English language text on those buttons too. Similarly, there's no option to change this text on the chat window, and some people said that they need to add their own text here. And others who don't use English also wanted the ability to change this text into their language. That can also be changed using our API. You simply copy, paste our API, replace the text in the API with whatever you want. And once you paste that on your website, it will immediately overwrite all this text, including the ones on the buttons, and will show it to your visitors in that particular language. So you can simply email support at zohosalesiq.com. That's support at zohosalesiq.com, or reply to the webinar invitation email that you got or reminder email that you got, and our support staff will give you the API and the instructions to paste it on your website. So if you have a web developer, you can have them put it on your website. Otherwise, simply follow our instructions and add it to the website yourself. It's just copy pasting what we give you to your website. Just change the text alone to whatever language or wording that you prefer. So before we can go into the summary, another common question that people asked is something that I should address. Let's imagine a company that operates in the US. They have two websites. One is the international website used by everybody outside the EU, and an EU website that is exclusive to people or citizens of the European Union. They want GDPR protections to be enabled on the EU website because that's the law. And at the same time, they don't want that on the international website because it's not required as of now. So, how do you handle that? We have been getting these questions constantly, so we thought it best to answer that before we conclude this webinar. As you might know, in Sales IQ, for every website that you have, you need to create a separate or a unique code for each of those websites. So the first one that's given to you is for the first website. And for every additional website, you need to click this create new button here, enter the name of the second website, and you will then generate a new code. Once you do that, you can go into each of those websites, click live chat widget, and scroll down to the section that says, would you like to enable GDPR consents? I've turned it on for this website, Zilker Tours, where I showed you the banner for tracking as well as chat. But if you go back to the other website that I have, which is I Love Ice Cream, go to live chat widget again and scroll down to the bottom. GDPR safeguards have been turned off for this website, which is why you did not get the pop-up once I entered this website. So this allows you to enable GDPR safeguards inside one account, apply it for a specific EU website alone within that account, but not for the other websites that don't cater to the EU market. So just go into settings, websites, click the EU website, choose live chat widget, and then turn on the option to apply the GDPR safeguards on that particular website alone. So that takes care of that. What we've seen so far is that there is a banner that shows explicit consent to visitors before we begin tracking them. And I even demonstrated how only after I clicked the Got It button to approve tracking, SalesIQ actually started seeing me. Until then, I was invisible to the system. This banner is customizable, the text on it is customizable, and so is the text on the chat window banner that does the same thing. And like we saw, unless and until explicit permission has been provided by the visitor, the data collected on the chat window will never be sent to Zoho and finally from us to you. And Password protection in the Sales IQ's visitor history module makes sure that whenever you step outside your desk or other people use or share your computer, the data, the personal data that your customers have given to you earlier with permission, is not being misused or exported by unauthorized people. There is also the ability inside Sales IQ to automatically translate messages that come in on the chat window. For example, someone from Germany can send me a message in German on the chat window, and I will see that in English. But when I respond in English, the visitor still sees it in German. So this real-time translation is made possible through Google's translation feature. And to allow that to happen, we send limited information, just the text alone that needs to be translated. And once the translation happens, we then show it to you. This all happens in milliseconds. No personal data is exchanged. Google does not know what it is translating or who it is translating for. That data is withheld by Zoho, and we are required to protect that data as per the terms and conditions agreement that you have signed with us. So that is secure. But in the interest of transparency, we show this notice screen to your visitors to let them know that translation is being used, and that is how you're able to communicate with each other. And the ability to mask a visitor's IP address and visitor history will make sure that it's not possible to use the visitor's IP address to find out information about them that otherwise may not be available. We have extended that same capability to automatically mask credit card numbers when they're exchanged by your customers over the chat window with your operators. So this makes sure that financial information is not compromised and the data remains secure. So with that, we come to the end of today's introductory session to Sales IQ's GDPR related safeguards. A lot of you might already be introduced to these capabilities through the forum posts and other promotions we have been running ever since GDPR kicked in. And we wanted to make sure that even those that may not be using all of these safeguards or are yet to use them become aware of them through this webinar.